To have a 9-foot healthy female shark eaten alive straight up set this scene of, it's a murder mystery.
In 2003, scientists tagged a healthy, fully grown great white shark off the coast of Western Australia and sent her into the ocean. Months later, the tag that was supposed to track her washed up on a beach. When researchers downloaded the data inside it, they found something that stopped them cold. The tag had recorded the exact moment this shark was attacked, swallowed whole, and digested. And what did the swallowing was not what anyone expected. Who was Alpha, and why was she being watched? The year was 2003, and Australia's National Science Agency, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, better known as CSIRO, was running one of the most detailed shark monitoring programs in the world. They had been tracking great white shark populations along the Australian coast since the early 2000s, and the data they were collecting was some of the best marine predator research anywhere on the planet. That year, off the southwestern coast of Western Australia, they tagged a great white shark that ticked every box. She was healthy, a fully mature adult female, measured 2.74 meters, which is 9 feet long, and she was in excellent condition, sitting right at the upper end of the typical adult size range for the species. She was exactly the kind of animal you want in a long-term monitoring program. The tag they attached to her was called a PAT tag, which stands for Pop-up Archival Transmitting Tag. These are the workhorses of large marine predator research. A PAT tag records 3 things continuously: depth, water temperature, and ambient light. It stores all of that data internally on its own little hard drive for however long it is set to run. Then, at a program date, a small release mechanism fires, the tag detaches from the animal, floats up to the surface, and transmits everything it saved to the Argo satellite network. Scientists then recover the tag and download the full archive. The key thing to understand is that PAT tags do not send live data. Everything they record stays locked inside until the tag surfaces. That is why findings from these programs can take months to reach researchers, and why what happened next took so long to fully piece together. Scientists in the documentary coverage that followed this case years later gave the shark a name: Alpha. She was a 9-foot apex predator in peak condition, swimming into the Indian Ocean and the Southern Ocean coastal waters of Western Australia. The tag recorded all her activities from feeding to migration. Alpha was, in almost every measurable way, one of the most dangerous animals in the ocean, which made what happened to her over the next 4 months an absolute shock. The data that changed everything. 4 months after Alpha was tagged, the release mechanism on her PAT tag fired right on schedule. The tag floated to the surface, the Argo satellite system picked up its position, and a recovery team found it on a beach near Bremer Bay on the southern ocean coast of Western Australia, roughly 515 kilometers southeast of Perth. They downloaded the data, and for most of those 4 months, everything looked completely normal. The depth profiles were consistent with how great white sharks behave. The temperature readings matched the cold, temperate waters Alpha had been moving through. It was the kind of routine observational record that thousands of PAT tags have produced from thousands of marine animals over the past 2 decades. And then, at one specific moment in that 4-month record, everything changed. The first thing that jumped out was a temperature reading that made no sense for the open ocean. Just before this moment in the data, the water temperature at the depth Alpha had been swimming was approximately 7.8 degrees Celsius, which is about 46 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the cold water you would expect in the Southern Ocean at depth during that time of year. Then, within minutes, the temperature reading shot up to approximately 25.5 degrees Celsius, which is around 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a jump of nearly 30 degrees Fahrenheit, sustained, not just a blip. There is only one environment in the open ocean that produces that kind of sudden, sustained warmth at depth, and that is the inside of a large living animal. The tag had been swallowed, but the temperature spike was only the beginning. Right after that reading, the depth profile changed completely. Whatever was now carrying the tag descended rapidly from near-surface waters down to approximately 580 meters, which is around 1,900 feet. And it did not drift down slowly the way a piece of floating debris would. The descent rate was fast and purposeful, consistent with a large animal swimming with intent after having just eaten. The tag then spent hours at that depth, inside something warm at that elevated temperature. Long enough for digestion to begin. Long enough for whatever was inside to start breaking down. Eventually, the tag worked its way back toward shallower water. At some point, it passed through the digestive system, was either excreted or regurgitated, floated back to the surface, and the programmed release mechanism eventually fired. It drifted toward shore and then ended up on that beach near Bremer Bay. Alpha, a healthy 9-foot adult female great white shark, one of the most formidable predators in the ocean, had been eaten whole. And the only reason anyone ever found out is that her tag survived the trip, ruling out the usual suspects. Once researchers understood what the data was saying, the obvious next question was, what did this? And to answer that, they had to work through every realistic candidate and see which ones the data actually supported. The first and most obvious candidate was orcas, also known as killer whales. Orcas are documented great white shark predators. We know this for certain. In May 2017, 3 great white sharks washed up dead on a beach in Gansbaai on the southwestern coast of South Africa. They had their livers removed with what researchers described as surgical precision. Forensic analysis pointed to a pair of male orcas in the area nicknamed Port and Starboard, named for the way each one's dorsal fin curved to a different side. The local great white population was so rattled that sharks abandoned the Gansbaai area for unusually long stretches afterward. The presence of just 2 orcas was enough to change the behavior of an entire local shark population. So yes, orcas kill great whites. The question is whether one could have killed alpha, and the temperature data closes that door completely. Orcas are marine mammals, and like all mammals, they maintain a constant core body temperature, sitting at approximately 36 to 37 degrees Celsius, which is around 97 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. If the tag had ended up inside an orca, it would have read close to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Instead, it read 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a gap of around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The depth data also works against the orca theory. Orcas do dive, but documented orca foraging dives are typically much shallower than 1,900 feet. The depth profile the tag recorded is not consistent with normal orca diving behavior. Also, there is the consumption pattern to consider. The Gansbaai kills showed us exactly how port and starboard operate. They maneuver a shark into a vulnerable position, then target the liver specifically, a large lipid-rich organ that orcas appear to prioritize as a food source. The rest of the shark is often left behind, its body largely intact except for the incision. Alpha was not killed that way. She was swallowed whole, or close to it. The tag sat inside a digestive system for hours. That is not how orca predation works. So 3 independent lines of evidence, temperature, depth, and consumption pattern, all pointed away from orcas. And when researchers looked at every other known deepwater predator, nothing else fit either. The temperature ruled out every marine mammal. The consumption pattern ruled out scavenging. The depth was within range for one specific type of animal. The answer was already becoming clear. The colossal cannibal great white. In 2014, more than a decade after alpha disappeared, Australian filmmaker David Riggs produced a documentary for the Smithsonian Channel called Hunt for the Super Predator. It was the first time this case got serious public treatment, and the phrase that has followed it ever since, the colossal cannibal great white shark, came from that film. The senior scientific voice in the documentary was John McCosker, a long-serving senior scientist at the California Academy of Sciences and one of the most respected great white researchers of his generation. His analysis of the tag data pointed to a clear and specific answer. What ate Alpha was almost certainly another great white shark, a much larger one, estimated at approximately 5 meters in length, which is around 16 feet, and weighing over 2 tons. This is where the temperature data becomes the key piece of the puzzle, because great white sharks are not cold-blooded in the way most fish are. They are what scientists call regional endotherms, a property they share with tunas and a handful of other large pelagic fish. Through specialized circulatory adaptations, great whites can keep certain internal temperatures, particularly in actively used muscle and digestive tissue, elevated well above the surrounding water. Their internal temperature in those tissues typically runs somewhere between 14 and 25 degrees Celsius, which is exactly what the tag recorded. The depth profile also fits. Great white sharks have been recorded in other tagging studies diving to similar depths and beyond. A large great white descending to 1,900 feet after a meal is not outside what the species is known to do. So the picture the data paints is that a massive great white shark, roughly twice the size of Alpha, found her in the cold water off the southwestern Australian coast and attacked her. It consumed her whole or close enough that the tag ended up inside its digestive system. It then dove deep, spent several hours digesting, and eventually moved on. Alpha's tag completed its programmed run, detached, floated to the surface, and washed ashore. Do 16-foot great whites actually exist? At this point, you might be wondering whether a 16-foot great white is even a real thing. And this is one of the most satisfying parts of the whole story, because the answer is not just yes, it is yes, and we have the footage. The maximum verified size for a great white shark is approximately 6 meters, which is around 20 feet. The largest reliably measured individuals on record come in around 6.4 meters. The most famous example is a shark named Deep Blue. She was first documented near Guadalupe Island off the coast of Mexico in 2013 and 2014. She measures approximately 6.1 meters in length, which is 20 feet, and she is estimated to be around 50 years old. Deep Blue is real. She was observed alive in recent years, and she represents what the species can actually produce at the upper end of its size range. The 16-foot estimate for Alpha's predator sits comfortably below Deep Blue's size. It is not at the extreme ceiling of what the species produces. It is a large animal, yes, but it is a large animal well within the documented range of a species that we know reaches 20 feet. These individuals are rare, and most people will never encounter one. Deep Blue is famous partly because animals at her size are uncommon enough that each one tends to get a name and a dedicated following. But rare is not the same as impossible. Other 20-foot class great whites have been documented or strongly inferred from independent measurements across multiple ocean populations over the years. The species reaches this size. We know because we have seen them. The biology required to explain what happened to Alpha is not exotic or unknown. It is the biology of a documented species doing something that, when you think about it, actually makes a lot of sense. Why people keep saying megalodon? Every time this story goes viral, a significant chunk of the conversation turns to megalodon. Why, you might ask? Well, megalodon, formerly known as Otodus megalodon, was a real animal. Its existence is backed up by a rich global fossil record, including enormous teeth that still wash up in coastal deposits and get dredged from continental shelves around the world. It was genuinely one of the largest predatory fish that ever lived. It also went extinct approximately 3.6 million years ago, at the end of the Pliocene epoch. The extinction is supported by global biogeographic analysis, by isotopic evidence from ocean sediments, and most directly by the systematic disappearance of megalodon teeth from sedimentary deposits worldwide after that date. The teeth show up in layers below a certain geological boundary. Above that boundary, they stop. The popular idea that megalodon retreated to the deep ocean and has been surviving there ever since gets the biology completely backwards. Megalodon was not a deep-sea species. The fossil record places it firmly in warm, shallow coastal waters. Its primary prey were large marine mammals, including early whales, which were also coastal animals. The deep ocean is cold and, by comparison, food scarce. It supports specific kinds of predators, such as sleeper sharks, six-gill sharks, and certain large squid. None of them come close to megalodon scale. There is no ecological niche in the modern deep ocean that could sustain a megalodon-sized population, and importantly, the alpha tag data does not support an unknown deep-sea predator anyway. The temperature reading was 25.5 degrees Celsius. That is a real fish's stomach temperature. The depth was 1,900 feet, and that is within documented great white range. The consumption pattern was whole-body ingestion at depth, which matches a very large shark. None of this requires anything unknown. The reason the megalodon framing gets more clicks is simply because it is a better monster story. Possibly more interesting, maybe? But the data does not point to a monster, but to an animal we already know exists. The real discovery. The fact is, intraspecific predation among great whites, which is the technical term for members of a species preying on each other, is not new information. Stomach content analyses from multiple great white populations over the decades have shown that larger individuals do sometimes consume smaller ones. Juvenile great whites are known to be at risk from adults in certain areas. But what the alpha case extended was the size at which this happens. A 9-foot adult female great white shark is not a juvenile. She was a fully mature apex predator capable of hunting and killing the animals that make up the bulk of the great white diet. She was, to almost every other creature in the ocean, genuinely dangerous, and she was eaten anyway, whole, by a member of her own species that was approximately twice her size. As far as the published record shows, the alpha case is the first scientifically documented predation event involving a tagged adult great white shark. That is a significant line in the research history of the species. And what makes this event even more striking is that no one saw it happen. The western coast of Australia is not unmonitored. CSIRO's tagging program had been running for years. The Australian Shark Monitoring Network maintains approximately 34 acoustic receivers along the coast, designed to detect tagged sharks passing through and trigger alerts in real time. The waters around Bremer Bay are among the most active marine predator zones in the country. Yet none of that infrastructure caught even a trace of what happened to Alpha. The attack occurred at depth in cold water away from every receiver, with no human presence anywhere near it. The tag was basically the only witness. If Alpha's tag had malfunctioned, or if the release mechanism had failed, or if the tag had simply not been recovered from that beach, no one would ever have known anything unusual had occurred. She would have been logged as a shark whose tag stopped responding, a not uncommon outcome in marine research, and the case would have been closed with no explanation. Luckily, that was not the case, and the data we got from that tag has allowed us to view the species somewhat differently. What we learned from the Alpha case is that great whites have an internal hierarchy based on size. A 9-foot shark is near the top of almost every food chain it is part of, but it is not at the top of its own species. At the upper end of the great white size range, there are animals that treat a 9-foot adult the way a 9-foot adult treats a seal. The role any individual shark plays in that hierarchy depends almost entirely on what other individuals it happens to run into. We do not yet know how often this happens. Alpha is one data point, and the Ganspa-I orca kills were a different category of event entirely. CSIRO's program in Australia, alongside comparable programs in California, South Africa, and the Mediterranean, are slowly building the data set that may one day allow researchers to estimate how frequently adult great whites fall to other adult great whites. Until that data exists, we can say it happens. We can say it happens to fully mature animals. We can say it happens at depth, away from any human observation, and that the only reason we ever know about it is when a tag happens to survive. Now tell us, what other secrets do you think we're yet to discover from these ocean creatures? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.